Hello my friends. I was working out in the garden in beautiful sunshine. Nice to feel well enough to do something out there today. And I thought I'd just read a little bit more of DERRY Wars before I packed up for the evening. This is DERRY Wars, Chapter 3, Part 5. The chapter's called Decision. The situation continues. So Patrick is still at gunpoint with Wesley, and Sheila, the young waitress, is trying to talk some sense into these two men. So the mention was of the noises going on outside as they waited and talked. The eyes of the Republican and the eyes of the gunman met. Well, Wesley, I obeyed orders because it seemed the right thing to do at the time. And if you're convinced you're doing the right thing, I'm not in a position to argue with you. If it has to be, it has to be. Wesley looked into those eyes of his enemy and tried to read them. He could see the courage, and he couldn't help himself respecting that. He wondered if the man really regretted killing his father, or was this just the right talk? Half of him wanted to pull the trigger quickly, but the other half didn't want to. Not yet. Chase Sheila out, shoot the murderer and then himself, because the security forces would move fast when the firing began. Sheila was frozen to the spot and wanted to cry, but couldn't. It was, however, her who broke the silence. I was wondering, Patrick and Wesley, if you think those British paratroopers have feelings of regrets too. She took off her waitress's cap, pushed her hair back from her eyes, and said, I mean, they've had decades to think about it too. The calmness of her voice, which betrayed nothing she felt inside, surprised both of them and punctured the explosive tension in the restaurant. It was Patrick that expressed himself first. I suppose that there are men with a conscience too, and I think in time young men become older and look back on the hot-headed war they fought with regret. That's if they've got any decency in them at all. Sheila looked at Wesley. What do you think? Wesley was unsure how to answer, but felt the sincerity of the girl's question affecting him inside. If this Republican pig feels some regret, I'm sure that the soldiers do. The way he referred to the Republican was with all the bitterness of a rotten taste in his mouth. At this moment, a mobile phone started to ring. It was a loud noise, a ringtone of the old Dire Straits song, Brothers in Arms. That's my phone, Wesley. Can I get it? Patrick was not going to make any sudden moves with a gun pointed at his chest. Oh, you can, but be very careful what you say, and if it's the police, hang up. The anger was gone in his voice, but it was a strong command, not a request. Hi Siobhan, how you doing? No, all's fine. Don't take any notice of the news reports. I'm just here to have a chat with Wesley, that's all. Hey listen, stop all that worrying now and tell your ma to do the same. For the first time, Wesley Crockett was being forced to see the life behind the Republican's reputation. That this man he was going to shoot was a family man with a daughter, that he had a wife, and who wants to know how many other children. He couldn't help himself because he wanted to know more, but there was no way he would ask. However, he didn't need to. Was that your daughter Siobhan? It was Sheila again, who kept the conversation going. It seemed to her that nobody was going to get shot in the midst of an ordinary conversation. Of course, she hadn't lived through the troubles when people had often died in violent acts while engaged in very ordinary conversation. People of all kinds. Such had been the war in the divided 6 counties of Northern Ireland. Yes, he was. Do you know her, Sheila? I know her a wee bit. I went to school with your niece Catherine, and she and I were chatting to Siobhan a few times. She was always nice to us. Oh, so you're a friend of Catherine's. She's named after my mother, you know. Didn't your mother have a stroke, Patrick? How's she doing? She's doing okay, but her speech hasn't come properly again. She finds that very frustrating, and in the garden, she's just not fit, really, for those things anymore. She relies on us to go around and sort it all out for her. However, she's still with us, and I thank God for that. Wesley raised his eyes and tutted twice. Your mother got a life my parents were denied. Patrick looked Wesley in the eyes again and nodded. It was true, so he might as well acknowledge it. You know, Wesley, there are many victims of the Troubles, all types of people, some killed, some maimed, some living without loved ones, and some living with what they did. It was a terrible time for everyone. Not one of us wants to go back there, that's why. You Catholics started it. I'm not going to argue with you about who started it, Wesley. I think we'd have to start examining a few centuries of history to work that one out, and we'd probably be reading it all differently and reach the conclusions we both wanted to anyway. Wesley's eyes locked again on the Republicans, and he couldn't help but be impressed by the calmness of the man. It wasn't what he'd expected, and he was searching for the real man here now. But you guys never minded taking the pound with the Queen's head on it, on the broom, did you? He's referring there to unemployment benefit. No, Patrick rubbed his chin thoughtfully. But you people never minded keeping the best jobs, the best housing, and treating us as second-class citizens. Since the peace process, though, I've learned one thing: Protestants are not monsters. They're just people, but they were brought up with a different set of prejudices than the ones that I was brought up with. You always blame us, and we always blame you. And the Brits have played the game of divide and rule for too long. We could accomplish far more if we were to work together. Not one decent Protestant would want to work with you. Well, you're certainly wrong about that, Wesley. I worked on a project recently to improve tourism in the Derry area, and Billy Dunlop, I guess you know who he is. Wesley nodded his head. He knew that Billy Dunlop was a unionist councillor in Derry City. Well, Billy and I spent a lot of time together over the last few months, and while we have our differences, I would say we have much more in common than either of us ever realised before. Patrick smiled and added, You might be surprised, but I think he'll be at my funeral, and so will his wife, who met up with my wife in this very restaurant for coffee just a few weeks ago. Then they don't know what you are, a common murderer. Sheila wished Patrick had not mentioned his funeral. Wesley, can I ask you a question? Ask what you like, Sheila. I've no problems with you, and you're not in any danger here. What if right at the start of the Troubles, Britain had handed the north of Ireland over to the Republic? How would you have felt living under Irish rule? Wesley shrugged. They'd never do that. Oh, Wesley, you trust the Brits far too much. Patrick was laughing. Sheila persisted. But what if? I wouldn't have stood for that. So you would have thought. If I had to, I would. Why? Because of my strong convictions against that. So would you have killed? There would have been civil war, and I would have fought, of course. So you would have fought and killed even though your actions would have been illegal, a rebellion against a legal government indeed. I would never have accepted the Republic of Ireland as a legally appointed government. Why would I? It's a Catholic state and I'm a British Protestant. Sheila nodded. I can understand where you're coming from, Wesley, but I'm wondering if you'd grown up next to Patrick as an Irish Catholic in an Irish Catholic family, would you not have been a mirror image of yourself, like Patrick is? I would never be a Catholic. But it's an accident of birth. Sheila hoped that she was not pushing things too far here. Wesley wasn't talking now, and Patrick said he needed the toilet. Strangely, he allowed Patrick to go to the toilet, and they were at the entrance of the restaurant. He was wondering how he was going to manage this himself. Even more strangely, he accepted Patrick's and Sheila's assurances that they would. He accepted Wesley and Sheila's assurances that they would want to use the toilet. Funny thing, Sheila, Patrick joked, but we never think of things like this when we get into these situations. When Wesley went to the toilet, Sheila said, You're staying very calm, Patrick. She smiled. Patrick smiled back and said, You, young lady, are a gem, and are keeping things going very nicely. If it was not for you, I think I'd be dead, and possibly Wesley too. If those sharpshooters came rushing in here, he'd be finished off as well. Well done. His words increased the girl's confidence. Wesley returned, almost surprised that the two of them were still sitting there waiting for his return. Sheila, would you be a darling and get us another drink and a cake or something? Wesley had a softer tone in his voice now. When the girl had gone, he lowered the gun a bit and asked his hostage a question. Why didn't the two of you just run for it? He was even smiling. You know, Wesley, I don't think me running is the real answer here. Your people of mine have been running from each other for far too long. Talking's better, and then at least we get to understand each other better. If the answer still lies in firing the gun, so be it. Running would just put everything on hold. That's where it's been for all of our lives. Wesley found himself nodding in agreement, and he asked how old Siobhan was, and about her child and the rest of Patrick's family. I envy you the support of a family. Really? I'm an only child. He explained that he had cousins, of course, but not a brother or sister. And did you never marry Wesley? Patrick asked. No, there was a girl once that came close, but she changed her mind, married a richer farmer from Ard Straw. There've been a few others, but none that lasted long. That's a pity. Patrick really meant it. Sheila watched as she prepared jacket potatoes and fillings along with strong tea and some cakes. She wondered what they were talking about, and was at least pleased to see that it was not an angry conversation. Outside, the security chiefs were scratching their heads. There had been an idea of getting into the building via the offices in the floor above the restaurant, but that had been scrapped. The siege advisor had made it pretty clear that would possibly inflame the situation. The people throughout Ireland awaited news, and the city of Derry just could not settle. The maiden city was not accustomed to peace. Was not so accustomed to peace that the memories were not stirred. Troubled memories. And most of the people, whatever their religion, just wanted a peaceful solution. Few wished to hear that anybody had died. So my friends, that's the end of chapter 3. I look forward to sharing chapter 4 next. Thank you for listening and weighing up the pros and cons in this story. Interesting to view both opinions of the people here, both founded in their history and their traditions. Of course, if we know the truth, it sets us free from those things. Thank you for listening, and it's a joy to share with you. Love and peace to you from Kate and myself. Bye bye. Bye bye.